the AI6 podcast with Joanne Sweeney.
It's my absolute pleasure every Thursday to be joined on the line with Joanne Sweeney. How are you doing this morning, Joanne?
Fantastic. Great to be back with you.
Great to have you on. As we were just saying off air before we start rolling here, quite a lot of jam-pack in this one. So I suppose to kick off, why are we talking about this now and not 2 years ago when the EU Act kind of hit public knowledge?
Well, that's a great question, and it's probably a bit confusing for people seeing all these new headlines and people on the radio like me going, well, guess what? The EU AI Act is now in force. But I guess the European Commission and institutions put the law together back in 2024, but since 2nd of August 2026, earlier this week, that it's now enforceable, which means Ireland's AI office, which also opened its doors at the beginning of the week, can now enforce the law. So it means that the law is in place, the National AI Office, along with the 15 competency agencies like Commission na Man, Central Bank, etc., can now enforce it. So we as business owners, media outlets, government, public sector have to comply with that law. And
you heard that correctly, listeners. That is the AI office. Now, that's not an office with AI bots, presumably. That is a team who are there to enforce the law when it comes to all AI use. Joanne, why is the AI Act such a big deal right now?
Well, I think Europe was a first mover, and we have implemented the most stringent regulation around artificial intelligence. So we're definitely a leader around governance. Other nations and some critics within the EU would say, well, actually, it's stifling innovation. But if you listen to the Minister, Niamh Smith, earlier this week, she said that innovation and regulation can coexist, and this is the best way to adopt and to roll out AI. And we know that the technology always operates and evolves quicker than the rules. And we need rules so that we can use it safely as consumers, that we can trust our banks, our credit institutions, our employers, because the EU AI Act is based on a risk system. So the high risk areas of healthcare, recruitment, credit, education, they are highly regulated because, Michael, you and I do not want somebody in healthcare, in education, in credit, or if we're applying for a job, having bots make decisions and not humans.
100%.
And so there are legal responsibilities in terms of transparency and disclosure, and also then not allowing bots make those decisions. So it's really safeguarding humanity, I would say.
Yeah, very well said, very well said. And I encourage all the listeners right now, if you want to look at the AI Act yourself, you can find it at artificialintelligenceact.eu. Now, and the reason I say that is because we've only got 10, 15 minutes, Joanne, so there's not enough time to nearly go through all the kind of key points or the main points of the AI Act. It is very jam-packed. But I suppose to kick off this conversation then, how is this, because one of the major points of the Act itself is impacting on businesses and big organizations. How are they going to see that impact now?
Well, you know, we're all using AI, let's face it, and we're using it in different ways. But the one thing that I would say is key is transparency, because there are rules. We are now responsible for declaring to our clients, our customers, our colleagues, our stakeholders, when we're using AI and when they're also dealing with AI. So, for example, if I ring up, my hairdresser and a voice answers the phone and I think it's my hairdresser, but she's actually cloned her voice. She is responsible for telling me that this is a cloned voice. This is AIJ, for example, and I'm going to take your appointment. If you go onto somebody's website and there's a chat function, there has to be a disclaimer saying you are now engaging with our company chatbot, but if you want to speak to a human, here's how you can get us. Same with government services, as you will appreciate. Isn't this a remarkable opportunity for our government agencies to cut down those phone lines and maybe those waiting lists 100%. By actually using AI, but they need to disclose. And then the other thing is about decision making. Is our information being used and processed by AI to make certain decisions? And again, there has to be disclosure. And then you have to have a human in the loop. And we've talked about that a lot. So if you're using AI, you have to materially and significantly have somebody with expertise and human judgment to sign off and make the final decision.
And also on social media too, right? Obviously in 2026, so many businesses, whether you're in retail or, across the spectrum, everybody's using social media for growth, for business, marketing, what have you. All of those social media platforms now, they have to disclose whether or not their posts are using AI in some process of the publishing, posting process. Isn't that right?
That's right. And actually, Google and Meta have actually signed up to the voluntary code, the EU Code of Practice on transparency of the AI-generated content, which is good news because these are US companies, right? Mm-hmm. So they're actually signaling that they want to comply with the EU AI Act because they're doing business here. So if we as content creators are creating content that is wholly or partly generated by AI, we have to toggle on that little button that says AI generated. Now, what I would say is if you're using ChatGPT, for example, to help you improve your caption, but you review it and edit it, you actually don't have to disclose that because under Article 50, they say a human has materially edited and has had significant input into that draft copy. No disclosure is needed because otherwise we'd have disclaimers on everything that we put out, right? But video in particular, and actually I must say that deepfakes are explicitly banned. And a deepfake is when you use AI to recreate the likeness, whether it's how people look, how people sound, or people's company logos or website, that is banned. So it's not even about transparency and having a disclaimer. You are not allowed to do it because we are protecting an individual's uniqueness and their personal or professional identity. So if you're a creator or a small business, don't worry. If you've made an image by ChatGPT, just put a little kind of disclaimer at the end of your caption going, hey, image created by ChatGPT. We know this. That's absolutely fine. It's quite normal now, but it gets troublesome when you are stepping into an arena where it's more about decision making or taking somebody's copyright.
The deepfake one is obviously a huge one, isn't it? I think it's kind of a no-brainer. I think it's fair to say as well. Like obviously we had the huge thing there in February with Grok AI and the big news story that was circulating around that. So obviously, that's a great thing about deepfakes. You mentioned there about reassurance and the kind of protection in regards to when it comes to our own content, whether our own personal photos or videos or whatever are being used to train that AI bot. How does that exactly work under the EU Act?
So you can actually report an account in relation to deep fakes, and it's now can be dealt with in the courts under existing laws. There's currently draft legislation going through the EU institutions to make deep fakes a criminal offence. So being the creator of that deep fake. So if you see it, if you notice it, report it to the platform. You can also report it to the National AI Office, right? And they will then assign that case to the relevant competency agency, depending on what the nature of your complaint is. So they're there to safeguard us. So Paul Byrne was brought in as CEO of that office. He's going to be building his staff, but his job is to enforce the EU AI Act. So if you are a victim of a deep fake, you are within your right to report it to the AI office, but also to An Garda Síochána and also to the platform and to request a takedown notice. And what I would say, Michael, is using AI to, maybe edit our friends and family members and colleagues can be seen as a bit of crack. It's not a bit of crack, and people really need to use their discernment to understand that using somebody's likeness is actually very serious. And what you think is a bit of fun and you may not have had any bad intent could get you in deep, deep trouble.
It's great you mentioned that because that was going to be my next question for anyone listening here now who, I think we've all been guilty of it. We've taken like photos of our mates or whatever and we've made like funny memes or whatever out AI. Is that now outright banned under the EU AI Act?
Yeah, a deep fake actually using AI to manipulate the likeness of an individual is banned and sharing it widely. Absolutely. And it sounds a little bit crazy because, as you say, we've probably been making memes of our siblings, or my kids, maybe my kids, and, making fun, and we all have a giggle. But we really need to take a step back and say, this is now considered deep fake. And what you and I think funny, somebody else could take offense. Then it gets on the wide web. Then everybody shares it because everybody else thinks it's a laugh. And then suddenly you've got a case on your hand. So we really need to be careful. And as I say, be a little bit discerning about the fun we're having with AI because it's free and it's just too easy.
100%. So let me just take a second to, again, encourage listeners to go check out the article yourself. It is jam-packed, but it's definitely worth the read. It is artificialintelligenceact.eu. And I think a big part of the EI Act, and we kind of talked about this in previous weeks as well, is how they've sectored off different parts of AI and how it's used under risks. So there's different risks of AI. And I think it's so important, again, you mentioned about safeguarding and having that reassurance that we're protected. as the public, Joanne, how are we going to be feeling the immediate effect of the EU AI Act right now?
You're going to be hearing a lot of talk about the AI office and the other agencies that can enforce it. You're going to see new disclaimers from websites that you've been visiting, social media posts of people saying, hey, I used AI to edit this, or you are speaking to a chatbot. So we're going to see a lot more of those disclaimers, which is fantastic. And if in doubt, we are also within our rights to email a company and say, hey, can I just ask, is this email automated by an agent, or is it coming from a person? So even going down to our emails, is it written by me? Is it sent by me? Or is it done by an agent? You would have to have that at the bottom. Initially, customers and citizens might complain and go, I'm not happy. But honestly, what I'm going to say to you is this is just going to become so normal that in 12 months, if we're still having these weekly conversations, that won't be a focus because we accept it. It's a new form of technology. But right now, it's newish and things are changing.
So let's just take myself, for example. So I use AI in different aspects of the station here, whether it's helping me out with research, prepping questions, what have you. If I'm writing emails, for example, to a colleague or to someone outside the office, for example, do I now have to disclose whether that's AI? If I am using AI in any part of that email?
No. It's really clear. The guidance on generative AI content creation is very clear. And it's actually been a gift to all of us. If you are using it for research, prep, all of that, but you're involved in it, you're reading it, you're fact checking it, you're editing it, you're putting your own spin in it. I mean, I hear you asking me questions. We're in human conversation here. No,
we hope.
Absolutely not. Yeah, we don't. And of course, I have to do my own research before I come and do these interviews with you as well. But no, we don't. If you as a human, as the expert, as the person employed in the station, that you're signing off with your own judgment, you absolutely don't have to. And actually, that's a good thing because then you're thinking going, oh, actually, I am the person responsible and this is on me if I get it wrong.
Yeah.
It's kind of making you sit up and think going, yeah, AI is an assistant, but also the buck stops with me. And so this is another tip for businesses and organizations. Identify the people in the organization who have editorial responsibility. In my business, it's me. In your station, it's probably each individual presenter, for example, because, you're doing segments or you're doing whole shows. But name the person accepting editorial responsibility and then you're fine. But it's a different story with video. If a whole video was made with AI, just say it. It's no problem.
Yeah.
Just say it.
Of course. Now, we're just about running out of time there, Joanne. But before I let you go, I think this in and of itself could make up segment after segment after segment just talking about the EU AI Act. But before I let you go, I suppose, what are some practical things that us as the public or business owners can take away from the AI Act? But also, I'm just curious from yourself as a journalist who's involved in AI, are there any things that you think weren't in the AI Act that should be in the EU Act? I'll let you take that first question first.
Yeah, I think as a business owner and as somebody who builds with AI and builds products and solutions, part of me is going, now my get to market strategy, is it going to be weighed down with so much administration and regulation that is it going to stifle innovation? Because we are so highly regulated compared to the UK, our next door neighbours, and the US. So that debate remains to be seen now. And that answer, we can only answer in months or in years. The other part of it is I sometimes feel that big tech versus SMEs complying with the same rules when we don't have the capacity and the budgets. I wonder how that's going to pass out. So does that mean big companies are going to have an advantage over solopreneurs and micro businesses? I don't know. So that's one thing that I'm cautious around. Advice in terms of what businesses should do now, you need an AI policy. You absolutely need an AI policy and you need to circulate it to your staff. They need to be brought up to date. There's also a requirement on employers to train their staff in AI if they are using it. The government have free AI courses, so don't let that be a barrier for you. And then review all the AI tools that you're using and make sure that any decisions the AI is assisting you on, that you actually have deliberate points along that decision-making process where humans are stepping in. And then for customers, just have your eyes wide open. Am I speaking to a human? Am I speaking to a bot? Is this affecting me in any material way? Never be afraid to ask the public sector agency or the business that you're doing business with.
Brilliant. Whew. We got through it, Joanne. A lot of jam-packed information there. We survived. But look, I appreciate you so much for coming on and talking about the EU AI Act. Again, for the listeners, if you want to read it yourself, check it out online. It's the artificialintelligenceact.eu. And Joanne, if any listeners want to connect with you, find out more about the Digital Training Institute, your book, your podcast, all the things you got going on, where can people connect with you?
Yeah, go to digitaltraining.ie or search for AI6 podcast on your favorite podcast platform.
Brilliant stuff. Thanks so much, Joanne.